Hey YouTube, what's going on? Lionheart here, and on today's video, I'd like to talk about Childe, also known as Tartaglia. Did you know the G is silent? I just learned that too. Anyway, in this video, I'll provide you with some tips on playing Childe, as well as 2 different builds you can test, weapon options, and a demonstration against Pyro Regisvine and a level 90 domain. I won't be testing Abyss in this video, but if you're interested in seeing how Childe performs on floor 12 as a primary DPS, I made another video showing exactly that. Childe leads Team 2 to a perfect 9-star victory. If that sounds exciting to you, I've included a link to that video in the description below. Also, before we get started, I'd like to give a special thanks to our supporters for this video. You! Without your help and viewership, none of this content would be possible. Many of you have stopped by my live stream on Twitch to say hello and share your support. Last week, the Pride grew by more than 250 members, which is pretty insane considering there were only 3 of us there a month ago. I also want to give a special shout out to a few select individuals whose kindness allowed hundreds of people to join us over the last few days. This includes Soapwingo, Milbert, and ID. Onimusha, True to the Soul, and Gizmo have also been huge supporters of the channel, but I'm grateful to all of you, truly, for supporting this channel. I couldn't do this without you, so thanks. Okay, let's talk about Childe. Childe can be used as a primary or secondary DPS. He cycles between melee and bow stance to deal both hydro and physical damage. While in melee stance, he deals very high damage but accrues cooldown time when switching back to bow stance. This means as the player, you need to create balance around when to use melee stance. Once melee stance is on cooldown, you'll have 2 options: play in bow stance or use another character. Also, keep in mind that Childe doesn't have an aerial attack in melee stance. This means you'll need to activate a glider or risk taking some serious damage on the drop. Hopefully this is corrected in a future version of the game. Childe unlocks some serious power from his constellations, including 20% lower cooldowns on stance switching, automatic riptide triggers on marked enemies, and conditional unlimited time in melee stance. None of these are necessary to use him, but you will notice a significant increase in his power. If you want to see the difference between his C0 performance and C6 performance, I've included my comparison video in the description below. Going back to bow stance, should you use Childe in this form? My answer is, it depends on you. Personally, I found that Childe performs well when paired with Fischl in bow stance. Oz basically turns Childe into Fischl, and it's no secret how strong she can be with the right setup. If you're a lower constellation player, Childe can also use this downtime to charge up attacks and trigger Riptide, which creates pretty good hydro damage in a small area around your opponent. Of course, if none of this sounds appealing to you, you can always swap out for another character and tag Childe back in when melee stance is off cooldown. If you plan to play co-op more in the future, I recommend becoming comfortable with bow stance and all it has to offer, since you won't be able to easily swap then. You can play in more of a close proximity, which makes it easier for you to transition into melee stance. I thought this felt pretty good, and did it a lot on our floor 12 clear in the other video. Lastly, remember Childe has 2 different elemental bursts depending on what stance he is in. If you aren't relying on his elemental burst to reset melee stance, which is a benefit only available to C6 players, you might want to test using elemental burst in bow stance. It deals less damage, but also has a much lower energy cost, and the damage is still pretty good. Not only that, but while casting your elemental burst in bow stance, you gain iframes while your stance switching cooldown continues. This can help make the time between stance switching feel shorter, which can make it more fun for some players. Alright, let's talk about builds for this video. I tested 2 different builds with Childe based on the characters I enjoy using with him. The first build is Noble Gladiator, which includes 2 pieces of the Gladiator set and 2 pieces of the Noblesse set. The bonus from this loadout is unconditional, which makes it very nice for all play situations. You'll gain 18% from Gladiator to your attack, and 20% elemental burst damage from Noblesse. This is the build I expect to see most people running on Childe, at least until version 1.2 comes out with the new rumored Hydro set. The second build, which you might not be expecting, is Thundersoother. I find that Childe has great synergy with Fischl and Oz, constantly applying Electro to enemies. Hydro and Electro pair well together, spreading both elements across enemies very easily. This creates pretty good uptime on Thundersoother, which increases all of your damage by 35%. Unfortunately, this build is more conditional than Noble Gladiator and requires you to build a team around Childe, rather than simply adding him to a team of other characters. In the moments ahead, I'll show you both sets performing with the same characters so you can decide what looks better to you. For weapons, I'm using Skyward Harp in this video. It's max level and max refinement, which is pretty powerful stuff. However, Skyward Harp is great even at refinement rank 1 due to its innate crit rate and critical damage stats. Your level 60 talent with Childe allows him to apply Riptide on critical hits, which is great for increasing damage output. If you don't have Skyward Harp, don't worry. There are also some great 4-star options to choose from. Rust, which is probably the most popular, provides up to 80% bonus damage for his normal attacks. This passive is active in both melee and bow stance. Stringless Bow also provides Childe's damage in melee stance with a boost, and also increases the power of his elemental bursts, while providing more elemental mastery for bigger elemental reactions. You can also consider the Battle Pass Bow, which has crit rate as a substat for similar synergy to Skyward Harp. And lastly, if you're only looking at crafted options, Compound Bow provides increased normal attack damage and attack speed, which feels pretty nice on Childe. The physical damage bonus substat will only be useful in bow stance, but it's not a total waste and a noteworthy alternative if you don't have any of the other bows available. Okay, that about covers all the build options for Childe. Let's go out and test what we talked about. I'm going to start each engagement using Noble Gladiator with my Skyward Harp. With Noble Gladiator, I have about 2100 attack, 74% crit rate, and 149% crit damage. These stats are slightly different than what I have on Thundersoother, which as you can see is 2000 attack, 71% crit rate, and 173% crit damage. Both sets have 75% hydro damage bonus on them. Alright, here we are in front of Pyro Regisvine, and as promised, I have the Noble Gladiator set equipped, and let's go ahead and test its damage. I'm going to open up using Fischl and Oz, and then switch to Childe, and that's what I'll do for testing both sets, just to keep the values consistent. You can see right there, crits around 2k to low 4000s, pretty good damage. And we'll switch to the ultimate, which hit for, it was hard to see with the white damage over that, but I think it was 35,000. So that's pretty good. And that's, again, Noble Gladiator. Now, let's switch over and test Thundersoother. You can see here in the artifacts that I have already done the switch. And we'll go ahead and just open the exact same way, using Fischl to summon Oz, and then switching over to Childe's melee stance to DPS Pyro Regisvine. You can see already the damage numbers look a little bit higher. Not all the time. We're getting higher highs and lower lows, and this is natural because when we hit with Electron, it does a ton, and when we don't, it doesn't. And the ultimate there hit when Electro was stacked for 38,000. So you can see it's kind of a give and take relationship. Thundersoother can get you bigger numbers. It can also get you worse low numbers, whereas the output from Noble Gladiator is maybe a little bit more consistent. All right, so here you can see we've put Noble Gladiator back on, and let's go ahead and run a level 90 Pyro domain where Childe should shine his best. I'm going to run official here, even though you're not supposed to run an Electro in this domain, just because I want the test to be consistent and to also show you some of the positives and downsides of using an Electro character paired with him, which is particularly important if you're thinking you're going to use Thundersoother in an area where you can be penalized for it. Okay? In this version, remember, we're on Noble Gladiator, and that's what we're using. Let's start with just melee stance. So you can just see pure hydro damage, no interference from anything else. Looks great. And then we'll switch over and let's bring Fischl out for some additional electro damage with Childe. See right away, we're going to use our ultimate here, our elemental burst. And we've actually done a good job keeping the damage output low. Had a nice Riptide Blast there to trigger that and switch back into melee stance to deal additional damage. Alright, now we're back DPSing onto the main guys, and again, the focus here is hydro damage. One elemental burst for about 35,000 damage, and now we'll shield up with Diona, we'll drop Fischl again, and that shield actually was immediately destroyed by the penalty for using Electro in this domain. You can still see the damage is pretty crazy. Even paired with Fischl, we're able to just take enemies out really fast. I'm using my elemental burst here, by the way, to keep high melee uptime stance, so you can see the benefit of that from having a higher constellation Childe. We're basically just using melee stance all the time, and that allows us to clear this quicker and focus on the part of the damage that I think you're most interested in, which is what can he do when he's in melee stance, as everybody will be running him that way, but only some of you will be taking advantage of bow stance, while others may be rotating different characters in. So that was cool. That was a pretty fast clear for Noble Gladiator. Now let's switch to Thundersoother. Remember, Thundersoother is a conditional bonus. That means that when we don't have Fischl out applying Electro, it's basically as if we had no set bonuses at all. You'll see the damage is still pretty good, but that is something to keep in mind, where in Noble Gladiator, the set bonuses are active all the time. So, let's go back in. Run a little faster this time, huh? Cool. Again, I want to start with just hydro damage, so you can see the damage is still pretty respectable, even without us getting any kind of a set bonus. And then we'll switch over and call Fischl in. This time I'm using my bow to illustrate the damage potential there. And again, we still used our elemental burst to break off those pyro shields that were on both of our enemies. Yeah, the physical damage isn't too bad. You can get a little more comfortable with bow stance. Alright, so here we go. We're into melee stance. We're having Fischl apply Electro, so you can see the higher damage from that. Looks really nice. And because we're not triggering overloaded, we're not getting zapped by lightning quite yet. Although we're going to get zapped because Fischl's switch targets to the Pyro Abyss Mage. Alright, so the Cryo Shield, just like before. This time I'm going to drop a heal because I'm a little bit lower health. And I'm also going to show you a little bit of damage in bow stance, just so you can have an idea as a comparison point. It's going to slow down our clear a bit, so don't compare clear times, but I just wanted to show you a little bit more of what the physical bow stance potential looks like in this domain. Alright, so let me again apply the Cryo Shield. We'll do Kaya's ulti, we'll switch to Hydro, and we'll just go in and beat this guy just like we were beating at the end of the other test. Looks nice, right? Yeah. So that's it. That's Thundersoother. And yeah, now you've seen two different sets. Well, that does it for Childe. I hope you enjoyed learning about both the Noble Gladiator and Thundersoother builds. I'm excited for version 1.2 to release, and I'll definitely do a follow-up video once I get my hands on the new Hydro artifacts. In the meantime, you can use the builds from this video to equip Childe and start using him right away. If you like the content in this video, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. I publish content each week about Genshin Impact, from character builds to farming routes that may help you in the journey ahead. I also stream live Sunday through Friday on Twitch, starting at 9 p.m. New York time, where many others just like you hang out and help one another. It's a great time, and we'd love to have you there. Alright, well, that's going to do it for me on this one. Have a great time playing Genshin Impact, and I'll see you on the next video.